Hello, everyone. This is Zeus Caravala, co-host of Real Time Recorded, and I'm here with my partner in crime here, Dave Michaels. This is week 43, I believe. And as always, Dave, it's another busy week in communications.
Actually, kind of a light week, Zeus. There wasn't that whole lot of announcements this week.
Yeah, there's always a lot of stuff going on. Maybe it's all the pre-briefings I'm getting or something like that. So, and it's good though, because obviously the stuff we're using has now been core to our ability to work and live and learn. So. It's good to see all the innovation coming. One of them, I think the week was led off by Ring Central. They had a developer conference, and I didn't actually realize this, but this is their first ever developer conference. So for a company that's actually had a pretty rich set of APIs, for them to not have a developer conference until now was a little bit surprising. They had an event called Code Together. It was October 20th through 22nd. I was a little surprised to see that they had 45,000 developers now. So they've obviously been, even without having a conference before, they've been maturing this. One of the big areas of focus for them was the new contact center APIs. I guess they released sometime this year. And most people don't think of Ring as a contact center vendor, but obviously they partner there. But more and more customers that I talk to that are buying UCaaS services from the cloud also want to buy CCaaS there. So the ability to tie the two together become important. I think overall, from a Ring perspective, the APIs and the developer initiatives are important because, as we talked about last week with Zoomtopia, for these companies to get not just big from a market cap perspective, but really big from a revenue perspective, they do need to become a platform. And so when I think about what a platform is, it's not a platform isn't a software foundation that lets the vendor do more stuff. It's actually a software foundation to let others do more stuff. And if you look at all the big cloud companies, Microsoft and Salesforce and even Oracle and those types of companies, they've all made that pivot. So we're starting to see the maturity of Ring Central here, trying to make that pivot to platform. And I think we'll see more and more of these developer type initiatives from them.
Yeah, it's a good thing Ring Central has events, because otherwise you wouldn't hear anything from these guys. It's a very quiet, almost secretive company that they keep their announcements. I mean, for example, they've their video product they launched earlier this year. They've been steadily improving that, and I didn't even realize that. I was just talking to them, and I got a list of all their improvements, but they don't tell anybody about these enhancements. So the big deal out of Code Together was that they had three big announcements. They had embeddable video, which is a lot like we covered with Twilio Signal. They launched their WebRTC to go. Zoomtopia just launched embeddable video capabilities. They launched basically call streaming APIs, and they also launched a high volume SMS service. So really, they're a CPaaS now, and yes, that's kind of what Zoom announced. It's what Microsoft recently announced. We've got Vonage Nextmo. We've got obviously Twilio. We've got Bandwidth. So it seems that UCaaS and CPaaS are really kind of merging into one.
Yeah, and that was actually sort of the vision that Vonage had actually had when they bought Nextmo. And if you look at their the new Vonage platform, is actually all built on the Nextmo platform.
Google finally started rolling out their new form of chat. This was been talked about for a while. We covered it in our recent podcast with Javier Sotero on my site. I have to say I didn't really get it before I started using it. And so the old Hangouts was basically three apps. It had chat, it had voice, and it had video. And now the new chat is only chat. And then there's, of course, Meet for video, and there's Google Voice for voice. And so it sounds like a downgrade, but it's not really three apps. It's really one app, because everything's in Gmail, and it's both on the web and on the Android client. And I have to say, it's much nicer. I'm in my Gmail app, and I just click on the chat icon, and I can see my chats. And I think they've done a really nice job with it. And it's no more app switching. I used to have to switch the Hangouts app. And then because I have two different identities, I had to switch my identity in Hangouts. And so this is actually really nice in Gmail. I think they did a good job on that.
Yeah, and I think it's part of Google realizing too that they as big as Google is, they really not made a big dent in the space. And I think they have to work from their area of strength, right? So they can't go build another meeting platform and expect to take some share from the meeting vendors, because there's already a bunch of them there. So if they tie it to Gmail, which is obviously their anchor application, right? If there's something that's used more than any other one, it's that one. So I think the tie into Gmail makes some sense for them, and it lets people launch those services from Gmail, which more people are using than anything else other than Outlook.
Google was also in the news this week because the Department of Justice filed its much anticipated lawsuit against Google for anti-competitive practices regarding advertising and search. Now, Google claims that it has lots of fierce competition in advertising, which, and admittedly that's true. There's lots of advertising options out there, but Google dominates each part of this digital advertising ecosystem, and they've got the YouTube piece. They make advertisers use their own tools. They've got a dominance in search and obviously in Gmail. I think that there's probably some abuses going on here because there's lots of search options and nobody else can compete. I don't think people realize that when you use Google to search on something, that you basically make Google better. And so all this volume of people searching for things, and depending on their click behaviors and how many times they come back to the search page and go back to where they were going, what they're searching for, is telling Google how to make their search results even better. And so other competitors can't really compete with that because they don't have that volume. It's that chicken and egg thing. And so there's a lot of different search companies out there, Yahoo, DuckDuckGo, I can't even think of them all, Bing, but none of them have any traction. And so I think that there's probably arguments for a monopoly here. What do you think, Zeus?
Yeah, there's two schools of thought to this. I don't have any problem with them having the 86% share that they have on search because they've just done a flat out better job. And I'm not going to go use another search engine because frankly, I get different types of results, but I like the way Google does it. The question is are they prioritizing Google things over other things in their search? And that's
we don't know because we don't know their algorithm. It's just yeah.
Some people inside the company have said that's have formerly worked there, said that's the way it is. So that is anti-competitive behavior. So I think Google is using their strength in search. And that's maybe to your argument that why they should be broken up is the search entity operated as its own independent business. There'd be no financial incentives for them to go ahead and prioritize, Google Maps and everything else ahead of everybody else's. So that's the problem. And it is kind of a network effect that once they've got people locked into that, it can spider into all the other things where they don't have as much share. And that's really the problem. And I think Google is, from what I understand, Google is rumored to be doing that kind of stuff, and I guess as this goes on, we'll find out.
So I mentioned search and Gmail, and those are the key apps that Google actually developed from scratch. Everything else that Google is known for, be it Android, YouTube, Google Maps, these have all been through acquisitions. And so basically they've taken their core technologies, their core inventions, and they've turned this into a huge empire. Yeah, I think it'll be an interesting lawsuit.
Something else that happened this week is BlueJeans actually launched their events product. Well, some new packaging and pricing for events. And for those, I'm sure everybody here is familiar with BlueJeans. They were acquired by Verizon earlier this year. And it's not so much the new packaging and pricing. I think that's the news, and although that was the news for them. But I do think it's an indicator that the future of events is really going to be digital, and lots of every company that makes the meetings platform has realized now you really can't host large scale events on these meeting platforms. I mean, you can, but they're suboptimal, and so you need other things like ticketing type of information. You need a way to move into smaller rooms if you're gonna have conference type things. And so I think you're going to see a lot more innovation from all the vendors, BlueJeans included, on trying to drive better and more efficient events. And I think that this world that we live in, Dave, unfortunately, I think it's here to stay for quite some time.
Yeah, no, I think virtual events is actually a really smart way to do events. We've been attending a lot of virtual events because all these conferences are being canceled. And I think there's lots of area for improvement. So I'm happy to see more companies innovating in this area. And it makes a lot of sense for Verizon. They're a huge company. They could leverage this BlueJeans technology and really take it out to the masses. So I wish them luck. So final story of the week is the FCC getting involved in Section 230, which is kind of odd, I have to say. So this is a lot of steps going on here, but Section 230 is what allows Facebook and Twitter and a bunch of other sites to have immunity about what people say. If the New York Times says something libelous, they'll get sued. If somebody says something on Facebook libelous, Facebook doesn't get sued, although you could sue the person who said that. And that has to do with what's called Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. And both parties are very upset about Section 230. They want to see it gone. I have to admit, Section 230 is really complicated, but I have yet to see an alternative that is better. It really, the fact is that these aren't publishers. The fact are they're more distribution companies, and the problem is that they're private companies, and now that they're flagging things that are flagged as misleading or false, people are getting upset. And do they have a right to do that? Well, first off, they do have a right to do it because it's a private company and private site. But what's really interesting with the FCC, which is why we're talking about it, is the FCC has claimed that this is a topic that they get to have jurisdiction over, which is really, really ironic because last year, maybe a couple of years ago, when the whole net neutrality debate was going on, the FCC jumped into that, and the FCC didn't do the way they handled that was very controversial. The way that was handled, we've lost net neutrality. I think that was a big loss. Hasn't been a big problem yet, but I anticipate it will be. And the way that the FCC claimed jurisdiction over that particular policy had to do with the fact that they said that they are only chartered to manage common carriers, and bandwidth providers are not common carriers. Therefore, they have no jurisdiction. So they said if the bandwidth providers want to get rid of net neutrality, that's their prerogative. So now with Section 230, the FCC is saying the exact opposite. They're saying, well, wait a minute, we're going to jump into this because companies like Facebook need to be regulated, and we're going to have a say on what they're allowed to do with content. And they're arguing that, I guess, Facebook is a common carrier because they're citing that code in the law. But obviously, Facebook and Twitter are not common carriers. So it's this really backwards logic. I think it's very duplicitous logic.
I disagree with that. I think they have become common carriers in a way because of the de facto standards now for social media. And I don't know if you saw the documentary, the Social Dilemma. In it, they talk a lot about how fake news actually spreads 6 times faster than real news. And so in a way, without any regulation around it, the social media sites are actually incented to have more fake news out there because they're going to get more advertising eyeballs to it. In fact, if you're an advertiser,
I completely agree with you that we may need some regulation around things like Facebook or social media. And I think that I think there's a lot of abuse that happens on these things. The point that I'm raising is that it's not an FCC thing.
Yeah, well, in lack of another body, I guess the FCC moves pretty slow, though. So if it was another body that moves a little faster, it'd be better. But I think there is an argument to be made that they're a common carrier. So whether it's the FCC or somebody else, we haven't really had any regulation around this. And I think the fact that it's now impacting, elections and really everything else in our life, I think some government body needs to step in. So I'm glad the FCC is stepping up. Perhaps they can bring in another body as well.
Well, that wraps up week 43 of Real Time Recorded, and I'm sure we'll be back next week with, I'm just guessing, week 44 of Real Time Recorded. Thanks for watching.